My next guest has written many novels, including The Silver Linings Playbook, which was made into an Oscar-winning film, and now he's back with us with his latest book, Love May Fail. Joining us now via Skype to tell us all about it is Matthew Quick. Welcome, Matthew. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And we were talking before, and I was telling you, thank you. I love the book. I love the characters. And I've been staying up late reading it because I just can't put it down. So,
That's fantastic.
well, thank you. So Portia Kane leaves her pornographic husband who cheats a lot on her and goes on this journey back to your hometown in New Jersey to kind of really find herself, but to help Mr. Vernon. She finds about Mr. Vernon, who was her former high school English teacher, who did a lot with students, which you did too, right?
I did. I taught for 7 years, and so the book is fiction, but it's largely inspired by my time as a teacher and after leaving the classroom as well.
You have, in the book, you have 4 narrators. Portia's one of them, and Mr. Vernon is another, and you have 2 more, the nun and her boyfriend-to-be. Why did you choose 4 narrators? It works, but I'm just curious because it's not like any other of your books.
I think it wasn't a conscious choice. When I set out, I started writing in Portia's voice, and there came a time in the writing where I realized we needed to know what the other characters were thinking, and we needed to know things that Portia wouldn't know. And I also wanted to show Portia through the eyes of different characters as well. So it was, in some ways, just a new way to write a novel for me. So it was exciting. But I also think because this book takes place over so many years, and you have these 4 characters that are so intertwined, that this story needed 4 voices. It needed 4 points of view. There's an old writer saying, serve the story, and this is what it asked me to do. So that's what I did.
You know, I totally agree with that because you have an idea in your head, and then what happens is the story kind of leads you, sort of the characters, in a particular direction. Is redemption for somebody else, which is kind of one of Portia's quests in the book, is redemption for someone else really possible?
You know, I think it is, and I think we're constantly trying to redefine throughout our lives as human beings what that means. What do we want? What are we playing for? And, Portia, when she begins the story, she's 18 years old. She's a student, a high school student, and what she thinks she wants out of life is much different than what she gets. And so the story is really about Portia trying to save her former English teacher, but it's also a story about Portia trying to save herself, get through a midlife crisis using this philosophy that her high school English teacher gave her 20 years before.
And the philosophy is so powerful. It's affecting not just her, but many other students. You have talked about how you don't always know how you're affecting your students or how you affected your former students. What's one story that you have about really demonstrating that there is some powerful impact, even if you realize it years later?
I mean, I could tell several stories about that. Yeah, when I was teaching, I was in my early 20s to mid 20s, and you're put in front of a room of kids and told to teach. And of course, when you're 23, 24, you really don't know much about the world, so you do the best you can. But what I found was that the things that I was telling students, they took very seriously, which in some ways, in retrospect, kind of scares me that they listened to me so much. But there were some really beautiful moments as well. I had a homeroom for 4 years when I taught, and we used to do this thing every morning. We would say good morning, and I would stand by the door, and I would give a fist bump, and we just do like a little pound. It was a little ritual that I did with the kids, and they seemed to like it. Somewhere along the way, they wouldn't leave homeroom without getting their pound. It was like this big thing. And so when they graduated, I made these little cards with my face on it and with just kind of my fist there. And I said, when you go to college next year, put it by your door, you give me a pound. And I fully expected them just to throw them away. It was kind of a joke, just like a little goodbye card. But a few years later, I met some of the parents, and they said, my son or daughter actually taped that up. They took it to college, and they actually did that. And it kind of blew me away because it was just kind of a funny thing that I did. But, to imagine that these students actually taped it up on their wall really showed me the power of teaching. And I always took my teaching seriously. I always took what I did very seriously. But in my 20s, I didn't realize what an impact you would have. And as students have come back into my life, as they've written me, they'll quote things that I told them 10, 15 years ago that I don't even remember saying, but they've been thinking about for 10 or 15 years. They'll say, remember when you told me this one bit of advice, it's really come in handy here and there, and I'll have no recollection of ever even saying that. And so that's really what the story's about.
And Mr. Vernon goes through the same thing. He actually creates a card for his students, and some of the students carry it around for years and years and years, the positive impact. And there's a scene that he has where it's the first day of his class, English class with his students, and he's giving them a test. And they're all nervous, and he's really having them write down what their feelings are, and the test is to make this paper airplane. What was the idea that you had behind it? Because it's really powerful.
I try to talk about it without giving any spoilers, because
I don't want you to spoil, right?
Yeah. I think Mr. Vernon is a teacher, and it was something that I tried to do when I was teaching as well, to challenge kids to think beyond grades, to think beyond tests, but to be students of life. And when I was in my early 20s, that's what I was trying to do, and that's what I tried to get my students to do. I tried to prepare them for the SAT. Obviously, we're trying to get them into college, but we were also trying to get them to think for themselves, to create an identity. And so this kind of first day test that I'm talking about in generality, not to spoil anything, is a way for Mr. Vernon to really challenge his students, and it makes quite an impact.
And it's great, and we're not going to give it away. But thank you, Matthew Quick, and it's going to be a movie.
Yeah, Sony's working on it right now, so
thank you.
Crossed.
I look forward to it. Just ahead, one local school is making charitable giving a part of students' everyday lives. How? We'll explain right after the break, so stay tuned.